Sure. So my name is Sharon Gai. I'm an author and keynote speaker in the topics of AI and innovation. And right now I'm busy with going all over the world, teaching more people about AI, what it is not, how you can use it to become more productive. And I also, throughout just the course of doing all of this, I've come across, whether it's a executive working in corporate or an entrepreneur, everyone is trying to use AI to supercharge their business. And I am serving, and I just finished the book, and now it's in beta print, of telling people how to future-proof yourself in this AI-driven economy.
So your new book, How to Do More with Less Using AI, comes out at a time when budgets are tight everywhere. Can you walk us through your practical framework for helping businesses achieve more productivity without increasing costs?
I have this usually meme that I show in a lot of my keynotes, and it's titled, "Is this the future org chart?" In this chart, there's a human at the helm of CEO, and then every other role beyond that is an AI tool of some sort. And usually the audience erupts in laughter because it obviously looks absolutely ridiculous. And then I remind everyone that this is, in fact, an internet meme. It's a tongue-in-cheek play on, will AI replace us? And obviously the answer is it could replace you if you're not sort of careful with shaping how you work with it. But then I showed also this other org chart, which is the real org chart of what I actually predict the future org chart would be, and that's a more normal looking org chart. But there's definitely a lot of AI agents sprinkled into different departments, and that's the framework that I use, which is I go through this exercise of running through examples of take one job that we have, and we look at the tasks that's part of this job, and then we look at what part of this job is very automatable. So where should you be in your 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or whatever your work schedule is? At what periods of time in your day should you be more so relying on AI tools versus more concentrating on the skills that make you a better human worker? People feel a lot more confident after I show them that framework, and they feel a lot more excited when it comes to embracing AI into your work, because ultimately I think that's the primary piece of it. Is I think there's so much fear mongering these days. I just read this article a couple of months ago of this Lloyd Register Foundation survey of 200,000 people around the world. Some countries are very gung-ho and very positive on AI, and then primarily China and East Asian countries. And then there are just so many countries that are quite negative on it. And so the fear that I want to dispel, or sort of the more rational way or more tempered or nuanced way to look at it, is replacement is for sure coming, but it depends on what exact tasks it's replacing.
You went from managing Alibaba's top 200 global brands to now helping organizations transform with AI. What's the biggest lesson from your e-commerce experience that applies to AI transformation? And what surprised you most about this transition?
Even when I was working with Alibaba, Alibaba has this mission of, actually, funnily enough, their slogan is to make it to do business easier anywhere. And for about 20 years, since the company had been founded, that was their slogan. But their main sort of way they're helping small, medium businesses is bringing them online, making them more discoverable. So the whole birth of Alibaba.com was when Jack Ma pretty much made this quote unquote search engine, or yellow pages for factories in China. And then thereafter he went into the e-commerce space, which is helping brands go from an offline to online transition. And though I have left the company entirely, I feel like now this next stage after this offline to online transition is online to an AI transition. So in a funny way, I feel like I'm continuing the company slogan, but I'm just doing it in my own sort of way, because that's the world that we live in now. And it's, companies or brands back in the day when you only had your foot traffic to depend on from an offline store, you had to transition in an online space because that's where consumers are. Similarly, in this current time, now that we are all digitized, you're going to have to use AI to supercharge the speed with which you work and the speed with which you roll out your products products and services. And if you remain in that previous age of being a little slower, then your competitors will just outcompete you. And so that's the reminder that I bring to a lot of companies as well as knowledge workers. It has been a transition, but it's a pretty smooth one. It's a continuation.
You describe yourself as someone who bridges different cultures, age groups, and corporate cultures. How does this fluency help businesses implement AI more successfully?
So I came up with this term called culture fluid, and the reason why I came up with that is because of me, my own sort of cultural upbringing, from the being born in China and raised in North America, and then bouncing back to China, and then feeling like, am I here? Am I there? And then I think in the first big part of phase in my life, it was a lot of trying to assimilate, trying to become the main or dominant cultural group, and then entering, the workforce. I had always been working with people that are a lot older than I was, and that was also trying to assimilate to that. And then in the second phase of my life, I think that was when I discovered that being who I am innately and intuitively, being the different part is my superpower, is my competitive advantage. And so just remembering to not wipe that away and always trying to assimilate is going to be the way that I'm going to be the differentiating power that I bring to a team, because I don't think the same way as the majority. And so that's how the term culture fluid came to be. I built a TEDx talk that resonated with a lot of people, especially people that felt like they were the odd one. And so in this AI age, I think, again, I'm a little bit like the odd one, because I'm a lot more on the cutting edge of what's happening in the AI space. Sometimes I think being alone and seeing a lot of those things could make me sound like a lunatic, like that future org chart meme. When I show that, people simply laugh because it's simply ridiculous. It's always remembering to be open-minded to new ideas, to new concepts, is pretty key to adaptation and welcoming a change, welcoming a new type of future.
Many executives feel intimidated by AI technology. What's your approach to helping non-technical leaders gain confidence with AI tools?
The big thing with that is this new word called vibe coding that I think a lot of people are acclimating to. The future language for code is good old English, or any other natural language you might speak. You might speak Spanish, French, any other language, but it's natural language. And I think for non-technical people, when we look at things that's happening in AI, sometimes it sounds like word soup or alphabet soup. There's just so many new terms, convolution neural networks, large language models. Sometimes we kind of get lost in swimming in all of those words. At the end of the day, the one big thing to note is, I think in the future, the quote unquote cap to what is possible, whether it's building a business, whether it's starting a side hustle, whether it's doing better in your current corporate role, is your imagination, because anything that you want to build is much more realizable now with the power of AI.
You've advised heads of state and worked with Fortune 500 companies like UBS, Nestle, and Deloitte. What's the one AI implementation mistake you see businesses making repeatedly, regardless of size, actually?
It's thinking too large of this project and not being able to quickly do iterations of it. I think what I often see is a lot of businesses think AI is this grand thing that we have to get into right now, so we must invest these billions of millions of dollars in incorporating it. There's a lot of silos that start happening, so different departments will launch their own things without an overall arching AI council to project manage and lead everything overall. I think it takes also quite a long time to roll out, and that's sort of the detriment of larger companies, is they move a lot slower. Whereas there's a new term in the enterprise space in China now, which is small but beautiful type of companies. It's like a new internet term that's bounced out, and it basically means the smaller you are, the more agile you are. Just sort of a lower headcount per revenue type of company. That's become a new marker of success for a lot of startups. There is, we sometimes don't need so many cooks in the kitchen to roll out something. But I think even if you are in a very large company, the way to navigate through all of that is just to break that problem down to smaller chunks, but to always have a one unifying body to tie everything together. AI, I think, can get very messy, or can feel very messy. I think a lot of companies also give up up quite easily when it comes to AI projects and when it has not developed the right metrics of success that it should have. We also have to remember that AI just iterates at such an incredible pace. So also in some of my keynotes, I have this video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. The comical example is how he ate spaghetti in 2023 and then taking that into 2024, 2025, and just the crispness of like how real it looks throughout the years. It's just a reminder that these models are gaining capabilities in an exponential fashion. If we did test out an AI project in 2023 and it didn't pan out to be the way that we thought of, we probably wrote it off. But just to be a little more patient with it, to remind ourselves to check back and open up that chapter again.
Unlike traditional keynote speakers who combine presentations with mandatory laptop workshops, why is this hands-on approach so critical for AI adoption? And what transformation do you see happen in those rooms?
This actually came from the market. So I used to start doing these keynotes, and then slowly these clients started to ask, well, how can we test it out? That was the birth of it. A lot of the things that I do is very market driven. So I absolutely believe in the product development principle of building it and then they will come. I usually don't think that's how it works. I always let the market dictate what they're thinking about this workshop. But now this workshop has sort of proved its revenue, and also it's now sort of a flywheel because after I do the theoretical piece of the keynote part, the second half is where they have to bring their laptops and experiment with some of these tools. Sometimes I also, if it's a bit more extensive, I do a pre-event survey. So before even doing that keynote, I'm asking that particular team, what are their challenges? How are they using AI right now? And what are some of the business goals that they're wanting to tackle this year? And taking some of the survey responses and tweaking the keynote and customizing it to the survey answers, but also taking some of the problems that they wrote down in their survey to use that as a prompt or a question that a lot of these executives will now have to huddle together to solve. A lot of industry associations have really liked it because this hands-on part is when they come together as a team, because usually in a more lecture keynote style, it's a one-to-many relationship where, maybe a couple hundred people are just silently listening, hopefully intently listening and taking that in. But in the workshop version or workshop way, we have people coming together, and these are people, and I usually before it starts, I usually tell the event organizer to curate these tables so that people are not sitting with people that they already know, so that when they come to an event, they are guaranteed to be making 6 to 7 friends or 6 to 7 people who are their peers, maybe from a competing organization, but definitely peers or just people in their industry that they're working on or working something with. That's been a very successful new product that I've developed, and it's really resonated with the clients also.
As a World Economic Forum global shaper, you're thinking about AI's global impact. Looking ahead, what should business leaders be preparing for now that most aren't considering yet?
I consider that I'm no longer a shaper. That was in a previous time. But I think everything that I had grasped from that organization, and also just being from the different cultures and countries that I'm a part of, is there's this talk of the AI desert. And so as we know, most LLM foundation models belong in either US, and there's a lot in China. There's a couple in Europe, also Canada, but that's kind of it. Sam Altman has this quote of, or his prediction is that in the future currency might be compute. That means that if computation power, which is trapped in these data centers that these LL foundation models run in, and if those data centers are mostly located in the US or located in China, then what are all of these other countries going to do when it comes to a point where we're shifting that value of currency? That, from a global perspective, is something that I think about a lot. And that's, I think, my previous work with different governments and teaching them about the digitization space. It lends itself pretty well in having more countries think about that concept and think about their national AI strategy. I think it's actually pretty important for a lot of these governments to start even speaking directly to these foundation models. We see a lot of that happening in the Middle East East, specifically UAE and Saudi Arabia, are very progressive and also very proactive in linking up with all sorts of LLM model companies and creating more private data centers or private clouds where they are using their own data to train these models, but having it in a more contained environment. I've heard a lot of where they have said that the responses of, for instance, if you're typing something in Greek and you're interacting with ChatGPT and getting that response versus if you're typing in English and you're getting that response, the Greek version is actually many times inferior to that of an English response. And that's just because of the language and the content that we've used to train these LLMs. And so from a different country user perspective, Greece aside, if we're talking about even a more obscure language, a language that even less people speak, but if that was the only natural language I spoke, because but we have to remember that not everyone speaks English, even though it is common, but just not everyone speaks English. And so is it fair that they have more inferior experience when they're interacting with these models? And so already we're already at such a different playing field from a national AI strategy perspective and different models that they have. And once again, that field is even more divisive, and that gap is even more when it comes to users. Not that I can solve that per se, but I think just having more people being aware of that issue is important to try to have more governments start to collaborate more with each other to try to solve it.